In this video, I'm going to walk you through the step-by-step process on how to install a barn door and barn door track. Start, we'll be taking this barn door and installing it over here into this master bathroom. Now it's time to install our bent brackets on the top of the door. What I typically do is I center the bracket on the stile on the outside, and that seems to look the best. Usually works out pretty well for me. But the first thing we want to do is tape this up. That way we protect it and also just give us something that we can make pencil marks on. Now we will need to locate our holes for this bent strap bracket, so we'll need to know where to drill these. Unfortunately, most instructions that come with barn door kits do not tell you exact measurements down on where to drill your holes. Instead, what they do in the instructions, they only give you one measurement, which is right here. They tell you from the top of the door to the underside of this roller, they want 2 inches. So what works best is to cut a 2-inch wide piece of cardboard, like so, and then you can use that piece of cardboard and put it on the inside of the roller here, put it up against the door, and then you can mark the center points of your holes for your strap right here. So the first thing I'll do is find the center point of this stile. It's 5 inches wide, so 2.5 inches is going to be my center. Take my square and mark that. Now we can take our strap, again, use the 2-inch piece of cardboard, carefully insert it there, press up against the door. We can mark these holes. So a couple tips when you drill these, be very careful, make sure your drill bit is staying vertical and you're going straight through the door and you're not going at an angle. Number one. Number two, this is a spade bit. You want to push it through just enough so that you can feel the point of that bit coming through on the bottom of the door, and then you want to take your drill and drill up from the opposite direction. If you go straight through, you'll push out all the grain and it'll be a disaster on the underside of this. So drill part way through until you can feel the point coming through, then take your drill out and go from the opposite direction. Now I could go ahead and drill the second bolt hole right now, but sometimes what works best is to go ahead and put your bracket on before you drill your second hole and make sure that everything is going to be aligned. The reason is, if both of these holes are going to be drilled very tight to the bolts, and if I don't have it quite just right, my bolts might not want to go through with my hanger. So waiting to do the second bolt until I can use the hanger as a template can also be a good idea. Now after we've got the bolts hand tightened, go ahead and take a couple crescent wrenches, very carefully get them snugged up to your bolt and nut. That way you don't potentially round over the edges on the black finish and make it look ugly. Now before we put this door on, we do need to slot the bottom of the door. There's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm gonna just use a router with a 1/4 inch bit and a guide. But before we run the router, we definitely want to make sure to tape the face of the door. That way it doesn't get scratched or damaged. Our next step will require us to put some pencil lines up here. So what I want to do is tape all the way across the top of this header. I like to use tan tape because you can see the pencil lines better versus blue tape. This is a very important part of the process. The bearings on the rollers that come with these kits are very loose and free rolling. So if you do not get this line level, your barn door will roll open or closed if it's out of level. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the center, which would be 39.5 inches. I'll measure from the other direction to double check. That is indeed the center. And now we'll lay out the holes to mount this track. So rather than trying to pull measurements and locate the holes exactly where they're supposed to be, a lot of times it's easier just to put a nail in your center point. Then you can put your track over the nail like so, and mark your holes this way, and that'll ensure that you're not going to make any errors in the process. Now we have, again, my level line across here, and each of these hole locations is marked. So we can drill a pilot hole here next. Now that we have our holes in, we can go ahead and remove this tape. In your kit, you're going to have these pieces along with your lag bolts. That's what we will use to attach the rail. I do recommend putting some tape on your driver. That way, if it spins and makes contact with your rail, it won't scratch the paint off. Go ahead and start the sample. A little bit loose. I do want to mention again, when you're driving these bolts in, if you're using a socket like this and you have it pressed against the rail and it spins, it's going to take all the finish off and leave a ring around the outside of this bolt, and it's going to look horrible. That's why I taped this off, and you want to be very careful whenever you're tightening these not to push against the rail when you're doing so. Before we put the door on the tracks, it's very important to put these track stops on. They slide right over the track. This keeps the door from flying off the end of the track and coming to a crashing fall. So make sure you get those on. We can adjust them in a little bit, but get them on and get them snug. That way you don't have any accidents. one on each end. Well, I had a brain fart. The acorn nut needs to go on the front of the door, not on the back. So now we've got the door rolling on here. The first thing I usually do is bring the door over, and I want to center the door so that I've got an equal amount of casing showing on both sides of the door so that it's centered in the opening. From there, I'll go ahead and put my stop all the way over so it contacts my strap here. So now I've got a stop on this side of the door so that whenever it's in a closed position, it's centered and aesthetically looks good on here. Now the tricky part is I've got to be able to put a floor guide on here in such a way that it'll catch the edge of the door whenever it's open and catch the edge of the door whenever it's closed. That's a fine margin most of the time unless you have a really wide door. This door is a 36-inch wide door, and the inside of my opening here is 32 inches. So ideally, I wouldn't want to go any less than a 2/8 opening in a situation like this. And once you start ordering barn doors that are over 36 inches wide, they get really expensive. So trying to make it work with what we've got here. I do have the floor guide set up so that it's catching the door right here in the open position as well as the closed position. So the next thing I need to do is go ahead and move this bracket up here over further. And in order to do that, I'll have to remove one of my lag bolts, slide it over, and then put the lag bolt back in. But I can't have the door any more open. I should say I can't have the door all the way going down to the end of the track because I wouldn't be able to catch my floor guide if I did that. So I'm pretty much lined up with this door edge, with the edge of the casing, but I think that's just fine. So whenever I have carpet, I typically will use a wall mount floor guide. This one came with the barn door kit, so it's 2 pieces. So I'll go ahead and I put that piece on, and then this slides in there like so, and it's adjustable. Then you'll just tighten these screws and that expands and locks it in place. This is kind of nice because I can have the barn door in place and go ahead and slide this under the door into the groove and put it in place here. Doing this one-handed is a little bit tough. There we go. So what I would now do is just sight up this edge to make sure I've got the same space here, and then tighten those screws, and that'll be good. Now one more step, and this is an extremely, extremely important step. This barn door can still be taken off of the track really easily. You can see right there, I can lift it right off. So potentially someone could close this hard, a child could slam it, and the whole thing could come crashing down. So in your kit, you'll find these little circular spacer blocks. These are to be installed on top of the door, between the top edge of the door and the underside of the track. And what that does is it fills that gap, and it allows the barn door not to be taken off the track. So that's the last step. We'll install these and then it'll be secured. This is the bumper stop again. It fills this space in here, and that is also why it's crucial that you follow the manufacturer's specifications on the space that you leave here, because if you leave too little space, these will not fit in properly. There's just enough space. So like we kept that 2 inches here, that's really important. So this is the finished product. Hopefully you found this video helpful. I will still come back and install a handle and flush mount pole later. I'm not gonna do that right now, but this is how you install a barn door.